I want to invite folks to type into the Q&A if you're having lunch with us, if you're on Facebook with us, if you're Zooming with us, type into the chat, type into the Q&A. This is an Ask Me Anything, where we're going to be chatting a little bit about this process and the goals of both organizations, and why we're such synergistic sister organizations. But we also want to hear from all of you, what's on your mind at this halfway point? What's on your mind in terms of where you hope this conversation goes after the summit? And because I know the initiatives don't stop here. But Akima, I'd love to hear from you. My first question is, what was your vision for this summit and this first gathering?
I think my vision for this was really bringing people around the table who are already working on it. I think so often we get lost in this idea of it's an idea. Like it would be great if, it would be wonderful if we had 10-hour days. It would be wonderful if we had childcare on set. It would be great if we had accommodations for differently abled folks. It would be, so we have all of these, these ideations, these conceptual thoughts around what would be wonderful, not realizing there are some people already doing that. They've taken the initiative, they've done the work, and they've taken the first steps. And so my hope for this summit was to start putting those people in the same place, not only so that they could broadcast the signal out to other folks, but so they could find each other. Because a lot of times I think that we know what the issue is and we start working toward the issue, but we do it in silos and we do it in isolation. And community is always better. And so for me, it's a question of how do we bring everyone together to begin having the same conversations, the same streamlined, structured, flow of conversations in a way that allows for them to really move forward differently. So that was the goal.
Yeah, 100%. I know that we've talked about when PAAL started, the big reason to create a network was because it's like these solutions exist, but they're existing in pockets. And when solutions exist in pockets, discrimination just thrives in the spaces in between. Like that's where the weeds don't get cut down. Do you know what I mean? It's like when everyone has to tend to their own garden. But when we open up the space and we say like, no, actually, this is all our collective responsibility, whether these weeds are bothering you or not, we're all responsible for caring for this space. Then we start to see a real standard making and real like industry-wide change in that way. I know that we have some grants, like a shared grant coming up, which is going to be very exciting. And you, at the end, I mentioned it, and you were also dropping in the chat a bit about the grants that are available. I'd love for you to share a little bit about those grants with people as a resource that Real Families offer. And then we can chat a bit about, those initiatives.
Absolutely. So the family care grant, the RFC family care grant, is designed for parents and caregivers who are working in the narrative film space. I actually want to give a shout out really quickly to Studio 9. They actually have a very similar grant for documentarians and documentarian mothers. So we decided that, there was not something covering those working in the narrative space. And so we have been giving out grants quarterly since last fall. We're coming to the final iteration of this particular grant cycle, which was funded by the Mom Project. So for anyone listening, hint, hint, we're looking to extend that grant and to keep that going. But the goal really is acknowledging that care costs don't just look like childcare. We do have a number of individuals who are also caring for aging parents. We have a number of individuals who have differently abled or special needs spouses or children. And so it may not always be childcare, but it might be therapies that are needed in order to ensure that your child can be in childcare in order for you to. So, there's so many levels and layers, and we wanted to ensure that we were being wholly inclusive of everyone and recognizing that, There does have to be a family component. It is for parents and caregivers, but we wanted to ensure that in the caregiving capacity, we were looking beyond, just children to ensure that we could get everybody.
Yeah, 100%. I know that this year our grants are going to be more explicit about we always have been technically, but just to really emphasize, we don't want, and I know you agree, we don't want folks selecting out of this granting process because they don't have kids. It's about artists with family care responsibilities and how that impacts your ability to engage with access.
Correct.
And
Correct.
PAAL and RFC are all about that. Like Tamanya Garza, who will be on one of the panels, she always says we want to support the entire life cycle of a caregiver. And what does that mean in terms of like when you're cared for when you're young, when you potentially like become a peer caregiver, and then you're caring for someone elderly, and then when you're older, like what does that mean that we're creating access for artists to have longevity, to have legacy, not to come in like the hot new ticket or like the celebrity established person. There's so much work and space in between for people to be supported. And I just want to shout out that Melissa said in the chat that she shared the PAL materials with the live theaters in her area. That's fantastic. Those materials are like the new standard of care. We help organizations learn how to change their workspaces to be more supportive. And Akima, you all are working on that for screen workers and for folks on set. So I would love to hear, the status of those materials that y'all are shaping.
Yes. So as of right now, many folks may remember that last year we launched a survey, and it was the first of its kind in the US to really quantify the families in the industry. And so what we did from that survey, we looked at what exactly is necessary for film and television in terms of sustainability. What is necessary to support workers, and how exactly do we do that and go about that? And then from there, we really used the information that the respondents gave us to determine how best to create our solution. So it wasn't like, hey, you know what? We think this could work. It was like really getting the information from the ears on ground and hearing what they were saying. And things came up like, figuring out childcare on set and childcare solutions and building those things out. So we are currently working with a few insurance providers as well as some pop-up childcare providers to provide guidelines for how to actually incorporate childcare on set. We're doing the same thing in the DEI space, the DEIB space, around guidelines for, how can you truly create a comprehensive, inclusive, and integrative work environment, because one of the things we talk about is that beyond inclusion is really integration. I love the way you said it in the last panel. This should just be average. This should just be the norm. And so when you really have an integrative process and an integrative ecosystem, you don't have to, did we, we're trying to pull in piece. It's just, this is the standard. This is the norm. And there is a way to get there, and there's a process to it. And so we are helping to sort of shape these guides to help folks really understand what those processes look like. Even things people may not think of as integrative to workplace wellness, but, flex time, job sharing, remote work when possible. Those kinds of things are actually really beneficial and inclusive and integrative, but a lot of times they go over folks' heads about, it's like, oh no, that's just work practice. It's like, no, but that informs work culture. And so we have to really look at those. So we're building out some of those guides and some of those things, as well as looking at how we can better offer some consulting opportunities for those who are saying, we're thinking about it, but we need more than a guide. We really need someone to kind of come in and support us through the process. So those are some of the things we're working on right now.
Yeah, I love it. I know that, we saw that your organization was starting up for a bit, and like kind of watch you from afar. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to connect with that person. And then you connected with us, and I would just love to hear from you in terms of, PAAL is so proud to be a sister organization to RFC.
Likewise.
There's so much like parallel journey to this, and my hope, I'll just say, is that by seeing our organizations support each other and spread the word, what we're doing is exponentially triggering industry-wide change, because the individuals who work these jobs are not just theater workers and live entertainment and onstage workers. They're not just screen workers. Many artists are multidisciplinary. So if change only happens in a certain sector, like we were talking about in the session before, then folks will experience support, but then they'll be diving right back into potentially the next contract that's in a different industry that won't provide that support. And there's so much fatigue in that, like half off. And so I would that's my hope is that people see our organizations joining forces and saying, oh, this isn't just a niche conversation. This is a part of a global conversation that belongs in theater, that belongs in the performing arts, that belongs with the screen workers conversation. And I would just love to hear from you, like what your hopes are for people to see our organizations collaborating and really kind of amplifying and magnifying this collaboration, and like why it's important for the artists that we serve.
No, absolutely. I think I think I share a lot of your sentiments, and I know that that's usually anyway. But I share a lot of your sentiments around, I do want people to realize that this is not a niche conversation, that this really does have global impact. This is a conversation that I'm having with individuals in, fintech and in, construction and medical and banking. And it's a conversation because so much of our industry is moving over to project and gig-based work. And, I think Lindley said it, which was like, I was like, yes, spot on. Our industries are some of the first gig workers ever. And so if we can figure out how to address this collectively here and our organizations coming here, then it becomes a conversation of, and how does that translate elsewhere? And how do we do that? And it begins by first, one, really reclaiming our power as it pertains to our agency and our authority as working artists and what that means. And that's why I was so grateful for this first panel. But then also, then what does that look like in practice? And how do we bring those things to the actual sector? What does that mean? And then as we begin to see those solutions, and that's really what all the other summit panels are about, is seeing that in action. And then once we have that, then saying, okay, now it doesn't exist in this silo. It's not in this bubble. Now let's bring it into community. And I think that that's a beautiful way for both of our organizations to be able to partner in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've just enjoyed so much in both of the panels so far. And I'm really excited also for the panels coming up, just hearing how translatable the practices are, where, I know that we both experience this when we have conversations with producers, whether it's theater producers or film producers. And there's this worry of, I'm going to have to learn a new thing and another new thing and another new thing. And it's like, well, actually, if you really, I love, I believe it was Rumi who introduced the word curiosity. If you have that curiosity, that healthy curiosity, and you just engage, you'll realize they're all part of the same thread. They're all part of creating that humane space. And it's only when we're like reserved against it and we're blocking off and guarded that it looks like a million different things that we have to change. And it's actually, when we engage with it, we're like, oh, it's this single concept of creating humane, accessible space. And the million pieces are all the different ways you can apply it.
Yep.
There's just so many options. And it's like, it's just that invitation to say it's so much easier the deeper you dive. Actually, it's always going to stay hard if you're on the fringe of the conversation.
Yes. Yes, and jump in with both feet head first, however you dive, go for it. Because
yes,
I think that's also kind of a subversive goal of the of the summit, which is as people see that it's possible and they see folks doing it and they hear, just like you said, how translatable it is, they hear how simple it really is a PA taking Polaroid pictures, and that actually does something for our camaraderie, for our morale, for our communication, for the dignity and respect. Wait a minute. So that one simple thing does all that, and people go, oh, we could do that. I want that. I want people to look at it and almost scoff at how simple it is and realize I could totally do that. That's not hard, because that's the thing.
You a Polaroid.
Right. It's like, I can take a Polaroid. But I think that so often we ascribe so much difficulty to it because we're on the fringe.
Yeah.
And I want people, it's like we're seeing what we feel are those million pieces. But the hope of the summit is that as people see it, then they go, you did what to make a 10-hour day possible? So wait, so it wasn't all these other things I thought it was going to be. It was this one or two simple shifts in we can do that. I want that.
100%. 100%. I know it's been so fun when we do the PAAL summits and be like, and here are these 4 people who have done 5-day rehearsal weeks and no extended tech hours, and hear them talk about how incredible the experience was and how the production succeeded. And I love that now we're able to partner with you to share the same news. And here are people who did reduced hours on set, and hear them talking about how they didn't need an enormous budget to do it. They just had a smaller budget. And so here's how they adjusted for that. And, I know that we both share such a passion by saying we're not just blue sky dreaming. We have some blue sky dreams, but we're providing you the data. This summit here is providing people with filmmakers doing the work. I mean, when we was talking about the database that the organization has created of anestheticians who are qualified and capable, it's saying, no, these are tangible solutions that we are forming, shaping, and offering it to you. And the call to action that I hope both industries here is the hard part is happening for you, and we need you just to join in the work. It's
adopting those measures. That's really it. It's without calling out names, it's saying, okay, mega $billion streaming service that hires only a handful of production companies, and those producers and production companies are then going to subcontract. Here's a list of people who are working 10-hour days, who are making it work. They're budgeting it in. They have these solutions and accommodations. So now, multi-billion-dollar streaming service, you can actually have equity and empathy on your set. You can have generative leadership practices on your sets. You cannot just go out and say, because you're already talking about the fact that consumers don't want content at the rate you're producing it. They want less content and better quality. But now people are beginning to realize, and the way we make it counts too. Yes. After seeing so much of last year, the process counts. So guess what? You need people who are adopting better practices and processes. Hey, we know folks. So that's really the goal, is to say, you just have to adopt. You just have to get into the flow and the stream. It's simple. Do what you've already been doing, but now do it with a lens of, oh, I just need folks who are thinking about this. That's literally all I have to do differently. And I have access to those people. Oh, again, making it so simple that it's like, why are you not doing it already?
Yes.
That's it. That's really it.
Where it becomes the absurdity to not take someone up.
That literally is the RFC goal, where it becomes like, you're weird if you don't like, and we love weirdos. So let me preface this with, it is absurd. Like, it is just, it is absurd to say you're not. We want 100%. This to be such a normalcy.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying, that PAAL says is our goal is to make it the exception that people don't have a formal caregiver support plan in their theaters and institutions. We want that to be the strange, like, why are they so dated? can you believe they don't even have a formal caregiver support plan? And that sort of cultural awareness and pressure to adopt best practices, in our belief, is actually teaching a community to set standards and boundaries.
Yes.
To say, this is the expectation I have on my employers and my institutions. And if we have it collectively, then we can hopefully create that momentum that will teach the decision makers and the leaders to say, we do not want to be left out of that conversation. We do not want to be the ones on the outside, as opposed to right now, the caregivers are the ones being left on the outside of the conversations. It's time to flip that model and say the people fighting for access are the standard bearers, and the people who refuse to engage with that access you're going to need to stay outside until you're ready to come in and engage with better practices.
Exactly. And we're right there with you.
Yeah, 100%. This is the synergy we're talking about. We have 5 minutes left of this incredible chat, but I wanted to be sure that we talked about, the role of these sustainable practices in anti-racism as a practice. And that PAAL has the new standard of care, and we have our 3 pillars of justice that lead it. And number 1 is, you cannot have an anti-racist organization without formal caregiver support, period. Like, end of story. There is no way to fix the leaking gender pipeline, to create disability access that is comprehensive, or to have an anti-racist organization focused on restorative practice without considering an individual's reproductive rights, choices, and family responsibilities in the equation of like what it means to support a human being. Like, it's missing a piece. The solution to the math problem will always be off. So I just wanted to use that to open up the conversation and ask you to share about the conversations you've been having with producers and decision makers in terms of the lack of sustained diversity in the screen industry. Oh. And I know we've talked about this so much, and I'm asking you to just share with the people of the conversation that you're having with folks to say, I know that you're struggling to diversify for extended periods of time. You do like on a project, but it's like, why isn't this staying? And the reason, tell us why the noodles aren't sticking to the fridge when we throw them.
Okay. This is I could have spent an hour talking just about this. I'm like,
next summit.
You knew what you were doing. You were like,
end with it.
For a quick second. So the main reason, and it goes back to the way we work, right? We talked before about power imbalance and, the lack of dignity and respect and how all of these things come into the equation, but they inform the way that we work. And one of the things that we have to be so mindful of is that we cannot simply look at anti-racist measure as increasing numbers. Increasing the numbers is not what makes it anti-racist. What makes it anti-racist is ensuring that there is actually an awareness and an understanding of who you have before you, of appreciating and acknowledging, of incorporating, integrating, because there has to be, it cannot just simply be that I'm here and I'm present and I'm at the table. That actually is not enough. Are you hearing me when I talk, or do I constantly have to be amplified by the person beside me? Do you not hear it until the person next to me says it the same exact way? Am I now in a place where I just don't say it anymore? I go to them and tell them to say the thing and they get the credit. We have to really look at that. So it's the way we work. And we have to ensure that, and this is the conversation I'm having with folks, and they're all like, oh. We have to ensure, if you are simply increasing the numbers, all you've done is increase the number of people who are now being exposed to that trauma and that harm. If you are not changing the way that you work, if you're not changing the way that the system is designed, and actually creating an integrative ecosystem in which I am truly a valued contributor, a truly respected contributor, and my presence is given equal value. And in some instances, maybe more, because you recognize that there's a toppled system. So you've got to flip things upside down in order to truly create equity. Unless you're taking all those conversations into account, what happens is, and this is true for many of the reports, they see an increase in numbers, but the percentages don't change.
Mm.
And so what they're finding is that you're getting the same drop-off rate. You're just getting more people in that drop-off rate now because you've increased the incoming. And it's because people get to a certain point, and it's usually at the point of advancement and retention. It's usually when people are getting overlooked for opportunity over and over again, when people's ideas are being dismissed or not even listened to, when people are constantly being brought in at entry level because they're told they have to pay dues, but they have more experience, emotional intelligence, and capacity than the person who's actually running the thing. So it's like, there's all these elements. And so you get this drop-off rate that looks exactly the same because you've simply increased the number of people exposed to that harm through the process. The process is what has to change. And that's the conversation we're having. We have to really look at how we are addressing our anti-racist measures and what that looks like in our, from all the way from not even just the hiring, but even conceiving the project. We have to start it there before we even invite another person on. We have to really start conceiving, seeing it at that level, and then all the way through to project completion and distribution, because that's another conversation, but all the way through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, that is so spot on, as usual. You are a brilliant friend and collaborator and colleague. And I know this is just the beginning for this summit trajectory. This is just the beginning for RFC and the work that you are all doing. This is just the beginning of how PAAL is honored to partner with you all and make sure that we continue to amplify each other's voices to say this is a global conversation. This is at the forefront of so many people's minds. And I want to make sure that you also have time to step away before our next session, which I invite everyone to. But I just want to say thank you so much for your vision in this space and for making it possible.
And thank you for your support of it. That means a lot. It does.
Here for it. Yeah, community, right? Thank you all. We're going to see you at the next session. Have a great one.